Okay, I believe we're live. How you doing? So just going to run some quick tests here. So, okay, looks like mic's working. I'm just going to test the music. Let's check that worked. And once you're in, give me a hi. Let's see who we've got in here. I should probably post this. How you doing? So just going to run some quick tests here. So, okay, looks like mic's working. I'm just going to test the music. Okay, cool. Looks like music's working. So there's always a huge delay, which is really annoying, but we're good to go now. So let's see who we've got. Hey John, how you doing? Hey Nick. Yeah, sun is shining. Same here, man. I mean, I live in the Midlands now. I live near, kind of in the countryside near Coventry. But beautiful day. It's been amazing today, which is a change. I feel finally feel like kind of the winter's over. It's like getting into spring, which is an amazing feeling. So let's just give it a minute or so here for people to join. Say hi once you're in. I'm going to just post this in the group as well. Okay, cool. Oh, I didn't post the link. That was dumb. So for anyone who didn't already know, this one's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a 1 hour mix challenge. So the track, in a sense, it's kind of cheating because it already sounds great. But that's why I chose this track for a 1 hour mix, because I think in 1 hour we're going to quite easily be able to get this to the point where it's like done, like properly done, as opposed to other tracks where a 1 hour mix would be a good exercise for just seeing how it'd be possible. And identifying what those like core, I'm always talking about, focusing on the core things that really make a difference. That's why this is such a good exercise. If I was doing it with like a mix of 50 channels, then it'd be good because you could see me doing mix bus processing and just some really big broad sweeps, but it would be very difficult to get it to the point that I'd like to get it, where I'd be happy like bouncing it down. Whereas this, I know I'm going to be able to do that within an hour. So it's kind of best of both worlds. Big broad sweeps, but at the same time actually having a finished mix in an hour. And also the reason I picked this track is because I want you guys to give this a shot as well after this session, or maybe some of you have even done it already. Download the multi-tracks. There's a link below this video. Do it yourself. Set a timer for an hour and give it a shot. See what you can do. And it's going to just force you to focus on the big things that really matter, like volume balancing, mix bus processing, fixing the biggest issues, being quite efficient with the way you use effects. So really good exercise. So hey Mika, hey Edgar, hey Branson. Oh, sorry, Brandon. Read that wrong completely. So let's I'm going to start just walking you through what I've already done, because I have done mix prep, because an hour enough. An hour mix without mix prep would be very difficult, and I don't really consider mix prep as part of the mixing process per se. So I think that's a good way to approach it, is maybe still give yourself like half an hour to an hour to do mix prep before you actually start the mix. But let me show you now what I've got going on, and that should give some time for, let's see if anyone else comes in. So give it just another minute and then I will dive in. Also, I'm definitely going to leave some time for Q&A. So what I normally do is talk as I'm mixing it and talk through my thought process, but with an hour that's going to be very difficult. What I might do is set a timer on my phone. If I want to stop and talk about something, I'll just stop the timer and talk about it, but I'm going to try and do that as little as possible so that it's actually, you're just watching like a live mix without any, just as it happens. But the downside of that is I can't explain as much. So I will stop if I think there's something out of the ordinary that I want to explain. But otherwise, this is all going to be pretty standard stuff. So I don't think I necessarily need to talk through every single thought process or every single step. It's probably just going to be balancing, touch of EQ, maybe a bit of compression, but it's electronic, so it's all synths and samples, so it doesn't really need that much. Probably going to spend quite a lot of time on maybe some volume automation as well. Just most of this hour is definitely going to just be spent on the balance and the volume automation, but then leaving some time for reverb and to hopefully have some time to play around with automation, not just in terms of volume automation, but also some nice effects and stuff like that. But let's see if we get time. Okay, so I'm going to start talking through. We've got quite a small group today, which is nice. So hopefully we'll have quite a lot of time at the end for Q&As, and anyone who's here will definitely be able to get their questions answered. So let's start by just walking through what I've already done in terms of mix prep. So loads and loads of gain staging. This was a big issue. I find it is often a big issue, especially with electronic music, just because a lot of the time, even if you're using like presets within Logic or different synth presets, they tend to just be really hot. And this came in, it was like clipping all over the place. So I've got pretty much just a consistent -10 on like every single channel. I've then bussed everything. So I've got a vocal bus because we've got these kind of like vocal samples. Let's just start having a listen to some stuff as well. So we've got these vocal samples here. And then we've got this kind of like main. And it goes into the chorus. For anyone who didn't know, we're working on electronic this week, this month even. So I've got those all bussed to one group. I've then got I've got a synth 6, which is just one of this. It's kind of the lead synth, and it just had so many channels. So if you do end up doing this, you'll notice how many channels. So that one synth had 4 channels. So I've just got that bus, and what I would normally do actually is I'd consider that like a subgroup instead of an actual group, because it's not like an instrument group, it's just that I want to be able to process that synth all together. It's actually going into another synth subgroup. So instead, let's pull this up here, call it a sub. So this is what I would do for like snare subs and stuff like that as well, where let's say you've got 2 mics on the snare and you want to combine them so that you can mix, but then from there it's going into the drum bus. So you can see here, let's change that actually. So this should be going to keys. So then we've got bass, just a couple of bass channels. And let's have a listen to that. So that's going to need some work. I'm not sure really what's going on there, so we'll figure that out as we go. Percussion. Let's see what that sounds like. So I've called it percussion because it's drums and lots of percussion. So I've just put that all into one. We could at some point, if we want to, just put the snare and the kick and the hat. So maybe it's like a drum subgroup. But for now, I just put them all through a percussion group. Then we've got sound effects, which is like kind of these risers and stuff. Then finally we've got all the synths. So a lot of channels to work with, which is why I think the bulk of this is just going to be volume balancing and just getting everything sitting right. It already sounds great. The producer who did this, I don't know him personally, but it sounds awesome. So we're not going to have that much to do in terms of shaping the sound. Maybe a bit of EQ carving to create some pockets for stuff if we have time for it. But I think that's not going to be completely essential. It already sounds awesome, even just completely unbalanced. Let's have a quick listen. So that's unbalanced. That's with nothing. It's already sounding pretty cool. Then I've got just some effect buses set up, so they're ready to go. And I just threw on some sends for the channels that I thought I might want to add reverb. Stereo monitor, I've just got on the vocal for now, but we might use them in other places. Then I've got AB, so my references set up. So references are ready to go. Then I've got some touch of like just subtractive EQ cleaning up that I did. So just cutting all the low end out of the sound effects and the keys. I think that's pretty much it. Let's have a look. So just a touch on the hi-hats as well. Just subtractive EQ, and I'm actually going to copy that. Let's leave it there for now, but just cleaning up a bit. And then R bass here on the kick because it sounded a bit thin on its own. That's the reference. Could have doubled it up with another sample, but this is without. So what that's doing is you tune in the frequency that you want. So I've got 50 hertz just coming in there. And let's see if I can turn this up. Let's just do it here. And then with. So that's just adding some low end because it sounded a bit thin. Because there's only that one kick sample really in the final chorus here, which I've got looped. So normally there's a couple of kick samples, but in this case there's just one. Instead of blending in another sample, I thought, let's just give R bass a go, and it did the trick. Anyone that's seen me mix before will have realized by now that I use this in pretty much every mix. And I'm doing that as part of the prep phase because, again, that's not something we necessarily need to do in the context of the mix. I'll have to tweak it in the mix. But for now, I'm working on the source material. It's like, that kick sounded a bit thin and wimpy. Let's add some low end to it. The same way I might try a different sample and all that other stuff on the individual channels before I start mixing. So I would consider that part of the mix prep phase. But then we'll have to come back to this and check that the frequency's set right once we've got the context of the bass and other stuff going on in the mix. But for now, that's a good starting point. So I think we're ready. I think we're good to go. So, any other questions about mix prep or any of that before we dive in? And what I'm going to do is, when we're ready, is just set a timer on my laptop, maybe. So 1 hour timer. Okay, yeah, cool. So then I can stop it if I need to. So any questions before we dive in? And then I'll start the timer and we'll do it. I'm going to give it a minute here because there's a bit of a delay. So I think that's it. I'm just trying to think if there is anything else. Let's turn that back down. What happened there? Okay, no questions. So if you have questions while I'm doing this, put them in there and I'll address them all at the end. I think rather than as we go, I'll address them all at the end because I want to try and make this as kind of cohesive as possible in terms of like actually just mixing for an hour. So I think we're good to go. We're recording. Okay, any plugin for the reference I could use in FL? Yeah, I mean, this one's pretty affordable. If not, there's one called Melder Production M Compare. That's very similar to this, but cheaper. Or you can just drop it into your project. So I could pull in a reference, put it on a new channel down here, and then add markers so I can skip between them, that kind of stuff. So that's another way to do it. If you go check out, just search reference in the members area, there's definitely a video of me doing that and going through the actual process, because I don't want to mess with this project now. But if you don't want to use a plugin like that, you can just pull the references in, but then you need to set up a mix bus for your mix so you can add processing to the whole mix without affecting the reference track. That's the only kind of disclaimer. But if you do a quick search in the members area, there'll definitely be something on that. Will we be handling the FX buses later? Yeah, so I've got them set up ready to go. So I can just start throwing on, that's meant to be room. So I can just start sending effects using just these sends that I already kind of have set up. I can just be like, boom. So yeah, we'll be coming back to that later for sure. I'm going to do everything, or try to do everything, even like throw a limiter on it. And just have everything completely done. So this is going to be interesting. I've never actually done this with a timer before. I've mixed in like roughly, I've done like fast mixes before, but never with a timer, with the clock ticking. So this is going to be very interesting. Cool, no worries. Okay, let's do this. So I'm going to start the timer. I'm going to start mixing. Again, I'll stop if there's anything, but otherwise, 3, 2, 1, let's do this. So I'm going to start by just bringing all these channels down and then get a rough balance. Let's make sure we got the loudest section. And let's get the kick. Right, I'm just going to start pulling channels. So my normal approach would be to do it in order of importance, but there's a lot going on here and I don't want to waste time looking around. Tonight. Okay, let's get some bass in here. Something weird without it. Let's get this lead synth sounding good. Tonight. So there's already something about that that's really grating to me. So let's just clean this up while we're here.
Tonight.
I'm also going to do something that I wouldn't normally do, which is just throwing on reverb now, because it just sounds way too dry. I want to like kind of vibe with this to keep me going.
Tonight. Tonight. Start your love tonight. Tonight.
I'm just going to bring all of these up. Tonight. 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 Start your love tonight. Start your love tonight. So I'm already doing some EQ on individual channels before the mix bus because there are just certain things that are grabbing me. I don't think this track is going to need a whole load of mix bus processing either, so I'm just doing it as I go.
Start your love tonight. Start your love tonight. Start your love tonight.
Something about that just sounds really off to me. I feel like it should be like really sub heavy, but it's not. It's quite saturated and top heavy. Let's see if.
Who's got your love tonight? 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 Who's got your love tonight?
Same thing there. Just make that just kind of sub. Tonight. Got your love tonight. Who's got your love tonight? Who's got your love tonight? It sounds like there's something that goes wrong there.
Love tonight. Love tonight. Night.
But not much we can do about that.
Who's got your love?
So getting back to the main chorus now that we've got some of the parts balanced.
Who's got your love tonight? Who's got your love tonight?
Still not happy with that. Let's try something else to just, God, what am I looking for? That's the one. Something else to just kind of smooth it out.
Got your love tonight. Tonight.
Damn, that's really annoying.
Got your love tonight. Tonight. Tonight.
That'll have to do. I can't spend too long on that. It's just a bit kind of in your face. I'm trying to round it out a bit.
Tonight. Got your love tonight. Tonight. Got your love tonight. Tonight. Got your love tonight. your love tonight.
So there's like some cloudiness around 100 to 200 hertz, but it's mostly in the bass. I'm just going to clean it there instead.
It's got your love tonight. 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 Please just look me in my face. It's got your love tonight. Tonight. Tonight.
I'm going to send this straight to the output so that I can do the, because that's harsh, but I want to add more top end to the other synths.
It's got your love tonight.
Tonight. Okay, nearly halfway. Damn it, that's going quick.
It's got your love tonight. 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 Who's got your love tonight? 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 Love tonight. Who's got your love tonight? 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 got your love tonight. Who's got your love tonight? 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 Who's Who's got your love tonight? 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 Who's got your love love tonight. Who's got your love tonight? 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 love tonight.
Tell me everything's okay, 'cause I got it. Ooh, baby.
Who's got your love tonight? 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 Who's got your love? 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 Who's got your love tonight? 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 Who's got your love tonight?
Ooh, that's a weird fade out. Okay, we're getting there. How long have we got left? 15 minutes. Okay. So now I'm going to start just going through from the beginning, see if I can, if there's any issues with volume or if there's any just like spot effects. Oh, what's happened there? Stop the timer. What's going on? Weird, that's never happened to me before. I just have to restart this project here. Okay. Damn it, sorry about that, guys. No idea what's happened there. Let's just reboot. Should only take a second. So, how's it going? See, we've got some questions here. So, yeah, I'm going to check these out. So, we've only got 13 minutes left. Then I will go through all of those questions. And yeah, Decapitators basically is a saturation plugin. It's just saturation. That's the easiest way to think of it. Okay, fingers crossed. So that needs to sound huge. We just figure out how to make that sound really big. I think we're going to need quite a bit of automation, so that's probably what I'm going to spend the next 13 minutes on. Oh, it's just not actually... That's a really weird effect. Much better with reverb. I'm also gonna pan. Damn it! I thought I could do left and right on that. There's another way to do this. stereo widener.
Who's got your love tonight? 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 Your love tonight. Your love tonight. Your love tonight. Got your love tonight. Who's got your love tonight? Who's got your love tonight? Who's got your love tonight?
Ooh, there's something really loud there.
Got your love tonight. Got your love tonight. Who's got your love tonight? Who's got your love tonight? tonight. Who's got your love tonight? Tonight. Who's got your love?
5 minutes all day.
Your love tonight. Your love tonight. Your love tonight. Your love tonight.
It is what it is. I can't do much about that.
Who's got your love tonight? Who's got your love tonight? Who's got your love tonight? Got your love tonight.
Okay, I've got 1 minute and a half, but I think I'm done. So anything I'm just going to do one last check to references on my monitors.
Who's got your love tonight?
3, 2, 1, and we're done. Well, that was pretty fun. I'm actually quite happy with how that turned out. Like I said, it's a great sounding track anyway. I don't think I would have spent that much longer mixing it. I think in this case, it's just an hour-long mix. It didn't feel that push for time. I think it'd be interesting to do this again on something that doesn't already sound amazing, something like a rock track, something that's maybe got lots of recording as opposed to electronic where it's like mostly synths and samples. But I'm not sure there's much more I would do to this. Like I would now take a break, come back to it. I'm sure there's a few things that are off, no doubt, and maybe I could have gone deeper into like spot effects and stuff. I didn't really get a chance to do any of that kind of stuff, but I didn't notice a particular need. So I'm pretty happy with that. I managed to get a limiter on there as well, so all I would have to do now is just change this back. At the moment it's set to 1-to-1, so that as I was adding more gain reduction and adding more gain, it was counteracting the output, so that it was the same volume. But if I just turn this off now, it'll be way too loud. But that would be ready to export. That would pretty much be done. So, questions, thoughts, what do you think? Let me know. Do you think it sounds finished to you as well? Do you think there's stuff that I missed? In terms of workflow, I kind of varied a bit from my usual workflow because I was focusing more on problem solving. Normally I would kind of follow my workflow more solidly in that I would go to the mix bus first, but I was kind of going back to the mix bus every now and then. So I was kind of taking more just like a problem solving approach because I wanted to make sure I was hitting all the biggest problems before I ran out of time potentially. And something like mix bus compression is a nice to have, but it's not necessarily solving a big problem. So I was kind of like taking a different approach. It was very much around problem solving, but let me know your thoughts in the chat box. And we've got some questions here that I'm going to run through now. So let's have a look. I'm just going to pull this up here. Okay. So let's have a look. So I'm going to go through all of these. So decapitator, yeah, is a saturation. No difference using something like Klanghelm IVGI, which I always recommend as like a free option. Just you just having a saturation with a tone control. So I was basically trying to like warm that synth up a bit and round off that kind of like harshness. So to do that, I was using kind of like dark saturation. So decapitator is just a saturation box with different modes, and then it was more towards the dark side than the bright. But equally, you could have used, I don't know if I actually have it. No, but Klanghelm IVGI is another great saturation tool that has like a tone control where you could basically do the same thing. Similar plugins from Native Instruments or Waves. So I'm not sure if Native Instruments do a saturator or if Waves has, I think the Mani, I haven't got it, but I think there's a Mani distortion. Waves, saturation, let's see. Not sure about Native Instruments. So Waves, there's like, tape saturators, that's a bit different. I'm sure there's M distortion. Yeah, so I'd say the most similar thing to that is probably Mani American Distortion, where you have hopefully a tone control of some sort. Drive, attack, release. Yeah, okay, that could work. So that's one option. I'm not so sure about Native Instruments, but again, just look for saturation plugins with a tone control. R-bass on the snare, yeah, because it didn't have much body to it. It was quite thin sounding, and I just thought like R-bass, because it's adding, because there wasn't much body there to boost within EQ. R-bass is actually adding new frequencies. It just adds basically like a sine wave, as far as I'm aware. Probably more complicated than that, but essentially it's adding like new frequencies. So this was the snare. Let's have a listen to that now. So. Sounds kind of weird in solo, but in the context of the mix, it definitely worked. It's just adding like, does sound kind of weird. Whereas like with EQ, it's not really doing anything. So that's with EQ. They both work. Just in that context, I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to use R bass to add some body to it. Let's see how it sounds in the context of at least the percussion. Yeah. Anyway, that was the thought process. I think if I had more time, I probably would have experimented that a bit more and maybe ended up using EQ. But I've done it before on snares where I've just added body. It sounds really disjointed on this one because it's so top endy. Adding that in, it still kind of works, but it does sound a bit weird in solo. But in the mix, it worked. So that was the thought process behind that. So yeah, you can definitely get subtle with the decapitator. It's so, for example, so it's not like massively distorted. You also have a mix control if you do want subtle. So it's called decapitator, which sounds like it's like really aggressive, but you can get some really nice just subtle saturation from it as well. Different way you process those transitions, any sort of sound effects, I mean on buses. So maybe you could emphasize on what you mean by that, Cook beat. Is there any different way you process those transitions and any sort of effects, I mean on buses? I'm not sure quite what that means. Like I'm never sure how much for compression because they're usually very different. Do I just tame them down a bit and use more EQ? So when you say transitions, do you mean the risers, the noise kind of like white noise parts? If so, like stuff like that. I mean, so perfect example. I didn't really use any compression that whole time. Literally none on individual channels. There's some mix bus compression just to glue everything together a bit and give the track a bit more energy. So this is before and with. And already I'm hearing things that I don't like. After leaving that for a minute, there's a bit too much reverb on there. But that's the only compression I used in the whole mix. So again, problem solving. There was no need for compression. In electronic music, I rarely find there's need for compression apart from on vocals, because if everything's a synth or a sample, it's already at the same velocity every time. Sometimes you might want to use it more on kind of like a micro level. So let's say you've got a snare sample and you want to make it sound punchier, then compression can do that. But using compression for like dynamic control doesn't really apply to electronic music besides vocals. So don't feel, and like those transitions, as in like if you were referring to those sound samples, then they didn't need any they didn't need any EQ, they didn't need anything. So don't do things just for the sake of it. If there's not a problem, there's nothing to fix. Good questions. There's quite a big difference between the track and the reference. What areas are you focusing on to get a similar sound? So, I mean, yes, musically there is. It's funny because I would say, like, in my head, they sound really similar. So when I first read that, I was like, wait, what? I thought they sounded like very, very similar, but it's because I'm focusing mostly in this context. I was focusing on the balance, so the volume of like the kick, the snare, the bass, like the core parts, and also the overall frequency spectrum, like how loud are the lows, how loud are the highs. And in that regard, I think it's pretty close. Pretty close. Again, this amazing producer. It sounds awesome. So that's the kind of stuff I was focusing on. Nick, Edgar, I was wondering that too. So were you referring to the references? I'm focusing on the overall energy, not the arrangement elements, listening to the energy, the bass, treble, highs. Yeah, but you could definitely listen to arrangement as well. So like how loud, because like the volume balance is really important to get that right between different genres as well. So, you know, if I'm mixing a rock track 1 minute and then I'm switching to electronic, I'm going to be like getting used to how different things are different volumes. So for example, in this case, the snares were pretty loud in both of them. In this kind of like electronic music, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the kick is like all there is and there's hardly any snare. Going to that from say mixing a rock track where it's like really aggressive snare, or even like jazz or something where there's like very light snare, I'm focusing on like the balance as well between each instrument, what's meant to be like the focal point for the genre as a whole. Start there and then kind of like break those rules when you feel you need to, but at least it gives you kind of like a reference point that you can either do the same thing or do something different. The reference seems to have less high end, like it's cut off. So yeah, one of them's got a bit more top end than the other one. So this one's got quite a lot of top end. It's a bit dips in the upper mids. That might be what you're hearing. It's got that very top, but it's definitely got like some kind of a dip in the upper mid range that does make it sound a bit, how did you put it? Yeah, like it's cut off. But if you focus on the actual like very, very top end, there's quite a lot going on. And then the upper mid range, kind of a bit similar to that. Like now listening back, maybe it could do with a touch less. So I could pull this back a touch. No, that's good. So yeah, that might be. Yes, I was thinking the transitions, mentioning the effects. Yeah, so as you can see, I didn't mix them at all. So sound effects as a whole, I've got like a bit of just a low cut, and then revival. This is just adding some top end, but I didn't mix them individually because that's all done like in the production phase. If you want like a really sub heavy or like a low mid transition riser or something, that's what you're going to use. If you want like a broad one, you're going to use that. They don't need EQ for any reason. There's absolutely no reason to EQ them, definitely no reason to compress them. There are no problems with them. They just kind of sound the way they are. If there was like a big problem, like they were poorly produced and for some reason like they sounded really harsh in the upper mid range or like some kind of problem, then yeah, by all means like fix that problem, of course. But in many cases, those kind of risers, transitions, that kind of stuff, they don't need any kind of like fixing. They don't have any problems besides maybe some like volume automation. Maybe if it gets too loud towards the end, I could like change the volume envelope or like change the volume of each individual riser, that kind of stuff. Noise sweep, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, So for the ref track, you think of the construction basics, not so much the tune. Oh no, not at all. I'm not listening to the tune like one bit. Focusing purely on production. So again, I think if you go to let's go have a look. But off the top of my head, like I can just reel off some stuff. I've kind of like created a video about this where I really thought about like what every single area you can focus on when listening to references. But off the top of my head, the main ones for me are overall sonic like frequency balance, like how loud are the lows, how loud are the highs, how loud are the upper mids, the low mids compared to the reference. Then volume balance in independent tracks. Then like tone of individual things, like in rock maybe the snare is really aggressive and has lots of crack, and maybe you want to go for a sound that's like that, or maybe you want to go for a warmer kind of like mellowed out sound, so you like on the snare, so you can listen to the tone of individual elements as well. Arrangement, if you notice that like there's just no low end at all, it might be because like the bass is playing an octave up and it's like it's not filling out the low end. So that's actually, now we're getting into like arrangement, which isn't purely production, but yeah. So if you go here and search references, so we've had a few questions about that. So yeah, we've got some different resources here. I would say yeah, have a little look at that. Okay. Do you have any fast hints where to start when building up sweeps in Logic? I'm not much into electronic music, but could use subtle sweeps for my pop songs transition. So I use something called Output Pulse to create my sweeps, but they have like a free bundle. Let's see if I can find it. And this is really cool. So Output makes some great production plugins. Let's see. So free loops, it's not there. Let me just find this, because these are really cool for anyone who wants those kind of transitions, sweeps, risers, that kind of stuff. Sorry, it's called Signal, not Pulse. It's a Pulse engine. And somewhere on this site, there are some free risers. I might have to get back to you guys on this. I'll post it in the... So no, that's not the one I'm thinking of. I'll have to get back to you guys on this one. I can't remember. I've got like all of them, so just kind of load them up and forget which one's which. Rev, X loop, Signal, Pulse engine, modern movement, Substance, analog strings. Free rises. Ah, there we go. Rev, that's the one. Okay, so if you search Output free rises, that boy up. Output free rises. Download those. If you really like it, I can definitely recommend their plugins. I've got like the whole bundle, and it's just great for electronic music production. My favorites are Exhale if you want kind of like that vocal sound where it's like chopped vocals, but otherwise Rev is really cool. Signal's really cool. Substance a really good bass engine. And then the others are... Substance is good if you want to do kind of like more aggressive bass, like dubstep or bordering into that. The strings are really cool. Yeah, I would definitely check them out. But Rev is really good for putting together rises of like different lengths, like different like white noise combined with like tone out, like more kind of harmonic rises, that kind of stuff. But start off with these free rises. They're really cool. Any presets in any of the built-in synths? The question has nothing to do with mix and such, but don't worry, time consuming. So built in Logic, So I don't really use the Logic synths that much, but what I would say is like with any synth is, yeah, you go through the presets and you try them all until you find something that you like. And then you go from there rather than program it from scratch. So it's just the case of like going through and just experimenting. If there's a certain sound you want to get, then you can find it. If not, you'll find a sound that kind of inspires you to take it in a different direction. But I haven't used the Logic synthesizers that much, so I'm not sure I'll be much help there. Do or would you use harmonic distortion? Yeah, so when you saw me using Decapitator earlier, that was saturation / distortion. Revival on a stereo bus, just add in top end. And yeah, it's free. It's a great plugin. If you've got an iLock, definitely get Revival. It's awesome. Output free rises. I'll check it out. Sweet. Any more questions, guys? That was really fun. So I definitely recommend you do this. Download the multi-tracks below. Go through that process yourself just because it's really fun. Don't like watch it back and try and mix along with me or anything like that. I would recommend instead you just like go through the process yourself, see what you end up with. Feel free to, I think there's a reference track in that folder. If not, you might be able to find one online somewhere, because this track is definitely out there in the world. So if you want to use a reference of the actual track, you can, but otherwise I'd recommend just using some kind of electronic references. But definitely give it a go. It's only an hour of your time. Really fun, really good way to focus on the things that matter. You could see, like, I'd say 80% of that was probably just volume balancing. Maybe more like 60, 70, then maybe 20% EQ. And then 10% like just little bits like reverb, saturation, that kind of stuff. So it forces you to take big, bold sweeps and focus on those things that matter. And then that can translate into when you're mixing your own tracks. You should take that same approach anyway. You might have the luxury of a bit more time to tweak a little bit, but that's where you end up in this place where you're tweaking for hours on end and you're not making big strides. So this is a really good exercise, or even mixing one of your own tracks in an hour or 2 hours, setting a timer and giving it a shot. Nick, very useful to see something different apart from my usual type of music. Thanks, Rob. Awesome. Yeah, give it a go. It's really fun. Really good track to mix. So I think the next one, I'm going to do something like quite light, like either singer-songwriter or country or jazz. I'm not really sure yet, but a lighter genre is going to be the next one. Then we might loop back around and go back to rock or anything else that people want. So that'll be next month. Look out for the email with all the details. So a couple more questions from Edgar. What the setting for Reverb Room? Again, don't worry about the actual settings. I ended up using 1.4 seconds, but it depends on the time of the track. So generally I like to keep it below 2.5 seconds with room reverbs. But if it's a faster track, you need to go even like closer to 1 second. If it's a slower track, you can get closer to 2.5. But I use this reverb because it's quite bright sounding, and I already had it set up with this preset that I've used before on electronic music where it's quite bright. So I've like boosted the top end, cut some of the kind of like muddiness, and that's pretty much it. So don't worry about the actual settings themselves, just the process of getting there, which was, if you missed it, I turned it up really loud. I already had my preset. I tweaked the decay time a little bit, but it's just kind of like a general room reverb, and then I went through and sent all the individual channels to it. Delays, so I can open it up just so you can see it. So Manny delay, so this is the stereo delay. I've just got a different time on the left and right with no feedback, so that's like a stereo slapback, and then nothing else. And then the mono delay, you saw me tweaking that earlier, so that I ended up timing to one whole beat and then add in like a bunch of cool effects so that it had this quite ethereal sound rather than just like a plain boring. I love Manny delay for this reason. So have a listen to this. So this is, let's just find. And normally I would actually low pass it a bit as well. But without any effects, it sounds like this. Still sounds good, but this just adds a bit more bit more mojo, bit more interest. It's juicier. Sounds cool. I love playing around with like cool effects like that. So yeah. So light genre would be good. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's definitely folk, something like that. That's what I'm thinking as well. Yeah, haven't checked the mono, so there's quite a few things I never got around to doing in that time set. But we can definitely. I checked it like on my interface there. So you won't be able to hear that, but I can sum it tomorrow. That delay is mega loud now. Sounds pretty good to me. Yeah, there's definitely a few. So, for example, normally as well, if I throw a limiter on, I would use if I still have meter plugs dynameter just to get the dynamics right. There's definitely a few things that I didn't do there, but again, it's like about focusing on that 80-20, the 80% that the 20% of efforts that create the 80% of results. Checking in mono is definitely important, but that's something that you can either do as part of the process, or in this case, it just kind of fell by the wayside. And this as well, I would normally do. Yeah, cool. It's pretty dynamic, so that's cool too. Okay. So if you had any trouble with the link, let me just check that that's the right page. Yeah, so I just searched Karl with a Karl and it came straight up. So maybe just search that instead of the whole thing, and you should find it. Cool. One last question. Do you do vocal pockets after the mixing session? Say you finish, but now you got the lead vocal, you go back and create a frequency vocal. Again, that's something that, like, if I had a bit more time, I would have done. For sure, is like a bit more shaping. Not vocal in this case, because like the vocal is kind of in the gap anyway. But just cleaning up a little bit between the parts so that there is a bit more room for each of them. But again, just something that wasn't a huge focus within that 1 hour period, because it's so well produced, it's not clashing too much. That's definitely something I would normally do though. Cool. So thanks a lot, guys. Glad you enjoyed it. Definitely go give this a try. Next month we'll be doing a lighter genre. I'll let you know what track and all of that. Have a great weekend. Thanks for coming, and see you again soon. Thanks a lot, guys.